less than 24 hours, Georgians will be under a shelter-in-place order.
McDonald, though, said he did not know the man was handcuffed and was trying to use his foot to pin him to the ground so he could be handcuffed.
If your friends, neighbors, or local organizations are not complying, report them to us.
Howdy, y'all, and welcome to the Free Georgia Podcast. My name is Jake Green. Thank y'all so much for joining me this week. If you have any thoughts on liberty, if you have any interest in learning more about what you hear in this podcast, please go to lpgeorgia.com or contact me directly at podcast@lpgeorgia.com. We have tons of resources available on our website. We have so many people who are willing to talk to you, to inform you, to educate you, and just and listen to you, listen to your grievances, your thoughts, your problems, whatever it is. This episode is brought to you by Viking Metals, a full-service, family-owned and operated sheet metal manufacturer. They offer a wide array of products, including both commercial and residential gutters, downspouts, copings, gravel stops, valleys, trim packages, and custom products. If you can think it, they can make it. Again, this episode is brought to you by Viking Metals. Today I have a very special guest, Mr. Jack Lloyd. Jack, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how's it going, Jake?
Good. Jack, I got to be honest. I'm somewhat new to libertarianism. I joined the LP like 3 years ago now.
Okay. Wow.
And I don't know all the names in the LP, and I didn't know who you were. But as soon as Elizabeth Melton told me who was going to be on the podcast, I started doing some research. And man, you've been in this for a while.
Yeah, I've definitely been in it a while for sure. I mean, I've been liberty leaning since like 2006. And I've done stuff, I guess you could say, in and around the LP since about late 2007, 2008 arena. Yeah.
Okay. I guess one thing that I have trouble with pretty frequently is burnout, is trying to do too much and getting too depressed that not enough things are changing quickly enough. What kind of advice would you give somebody that, as someone who's been in this for like 15, 16 years?
Yeah. I mean, it just depends on the person. I would say when it comes to the principles, first and foremost, I mean, that's always about your own life and your own behavior and your own choices, in terms of what you do with others and your economic life and your work. So I think that, liberty starts at home and it starts with the individual. So I think that where you really ground your sense of self-purpose and direction is thinking about how to be the best version of yourself first. And really taking care of yourself, getting self-knowledge, like working, on, I guess you could say, your past traumas and things that, you may have struggled through. Because I think a lot of people who are coming to libertarianism very often are coming from other backgrounds. It's rare. I mean, it happens, but it's rare that someone is born libertarian in terms of like their family was libertarian, they grew up in that kind of thing. And that's a little bit more rare. It's more common that someone discovers it after being, whatever. They could have been a Democrat, Republican, or someone apathetic. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack as an individual and to reflect on, and the totality of their life and choices. So I think that's kind of the first place to get grounded in is taking care of yourself and your needs and your mental health and all that good stuff. And then once you have that kind of ground, then it becomes easier to have a vision of what you're passionate about. I think sometimes people do the opposite first. So sometimes people will get really excited about the principles, almost like a new convert, like, I can compare it to like Christianity or something like that. And someone's like a new believer. And all of a sudden they want to do everything, but they haven't worked on themselves first, kind of thing. And they get burned out with a lot of problems and contradictions. So the libertarianism is the same thing. There's a lot that you have to take care of yourself first. And then after that, it becomes easier, to manage. Oh, I'm a libertarian now. I got to run for office. I got to do this. Like, no, like, take care of yourself first. Work on your grounded first.
Yeah, for sure. I actually recently saw a tweet. I forget who tweeted it, but they were saying that is kind of a knock, but kind of an interesting point, is that like podcasting has I guess, kind of diluted the libertarian message and made it less intellectually rigorous for people to like jump into the sphere. Do you have any thoughts on that kind of thinking?
It depends. I mean, I would say there's nothing wrong with podcasting. Of course, a lot of people will use podcasting as their processing. So sometimes you'll see people who are not experts, they're kind of new to it, but they're doing the processing out loud. They're like talking and learning at the same time. And there's nothing wrong with that if someone is doing that just because they're doing it as a form of enjoyment. They're like discussing things with other people and talking about philosophy and ideas. There's nothing wrong with that. I'd say where it's harmful is someone is like, oh, I became a libertarian, last week, and now I have a podcast and I'm the authority. And like, then they're, really it's destroying every sense of a credibility they have as they, say a bunch of different contradictory things. And people are like, what? That's, and that's common because a lot of people who are, coming in it for those reasons, if they want it just for the fame or just for the interest of the clout, then, they might be trying to be a bigger fish in a small pond and trying to, go up that way. And it's true. You can do that for any fandom or any genre of things, right? You can look for a way to try to get big. But if you do that and then you're contradictory a lot, you're going to, you're going to get hit pretty hard by a lot of other people who are like, yeah, you're talking
for sure. That does happen quite a bit. There's definitely some I did a whole podcast on like infighting and everything that happens, and there's some people who will sling some crap at other people as soon as they say anything wrong. And for me personally, like I enjoy like new libertarians going on podcasts and like hearing how they got there and like seeing how they grow over the years. I think it makes it more relatable to people who aren't necessarily like fully libertarian yet, in my opinion. And yeah, I guess you're right. The problem is when they start acting like they're the authority on everything right off the bat. So what was your path to liberty like? Because for me, like I had to change. I grew up Republican and I had to change a little bit, but like I always kind of felt disassociated from the Republican Party and didn't like, I agreed with a couple points. So, but then I, over time, figured out that, man, I don't agree with them on most of the important points. So it was kind of an easier transition for me. And it was kind of like I found my home. Whereas I know a lot of people, it takes a long time of like breaking down what like their thought processes from where they were before. What was your path like?
So I grew up in, I guess you could say, an evangelical conservative, but really neoconservative household. And so that was a lot of my modeling. And I went to a private Christian school where that was more common. So I, when you came to adulthood and being a freshman in college, I was basically a Republican neoconservative who, really gave lip service to freedom and did kind of like want those things. But in reality, like I was making justifications for everything from, money to Israel to wars to, police and the war on drugs and stuff. So I had a very typical mainstream background. I didn't have even like some young people might get in school. I didn't read Ayn Rand. We didn't read Bastiat in school. I didn't, read anything that, might be like somewhat libertarian, where you might get a little touch on it, even like Milton Friedman, like his Free to Choose series. We didn't have that in school. So I really didn't have much of that kind of thinking or thoughts presented to me until I was free to choose to look up things on the internet and start to Google stuff and talk to some people on campus and whatnot. And I didn't even actually have my first libertarian thoughts come from talking to someone who's libertarian per se. I had the investigation come from a history class. I was going over the American eugenics movement, and they were talking about Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes and the case of Buck v. Bell, where Carrie Buck was this young woman who was forcibly sterilized because of basically her being epileptic. And they're saying, oh, she's too stupid to breed. So hearing that, I was like, what? That's crazy. I never thought that would happen here. Like I thought that happened in like Germany or something. So that made me go, okay, well, if I didn't know that, what else did I know about history? So I had to go to start relooking at everything else. And I came across like Alex Jones and stuff back then, which was a lot of fun. And I was definitely going down that rabbit hole of looking at everything anew and like, oh, okay, wow. what they teach you in school, the history books, yeah, they leave out all the bad stuff that the government does. You know what I mean? So that really was what kind of like shocked me out of my statism and pushed me down the path of starting to look into libertarian ideas. And eventually, like I came across this guy named Mark Stevens on the No State Project. He had a website and it asked the question, should goods and services be provided at the barrel of a gun? And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. I can't ethically say that's right, no matter what. I'm like, I think ethically that doesn't make sense. So that's what kind of turned me all the way to a voluntarist eventually, thinking through that. So.
Gotcha. That's really cool. I like that path. That's a good one. I'm glad it didn't take you too long to get there too, because some people it takes forever. Like I can see my parents slowly getting there just by me etching away, year by year. But man, it takes a long time to break people of some habits.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it took me years to go from neoconservative to full on voluntarist. I mean, I think that process was like 4 years. I mean, to get to libertarian, big L, it took only like a year and a half or so. But yeah, I mean, it definitely took a while to break down a lot of different presuppositions I had about the government and everything in the economy. I mean, the brainwashing is heavy. You know what I mean? You really are told the government is your savior. So.
Yeah, no, it took me quite a while to let go of my love for George W. Bush. That was really difficult for me. I grew up going to his rallies and stuff like that. So, as like a high schooler, and man, yeah, that was rough. I had a W sticker until like 2 years ago, and I finally had like balls to just toss it out.
Yeah, he's pretty bad. I mean, not as bad as his dad and his granddad, but he's definitely just a part of that whole military industrial complex regime.
Yeah, so. For sure. Gotta say, I love meeting and talking to people who are in like the creative spaces in the liberty movement. So like I'm a filmmaker. I make documentaries mainly, along with a few other things. But it's really cool to, talk to people who have other genres that they are like skilled in. Did you always know that you could write, and did you always want to write?
No, I not per se. Like I've known that I could write things, but I didn't really think that was going to be a serious thing until way later. When I was an undergrad, I originally was in my school's art school for digital media because I wanted to do something in production. And then their program sucked. So I was like, okay, not that it wasn't a good school. It was a great school. It's just their program was like, here, you're going to do pottery and, ceramics and painting. I'm like, I came here to use computers, not do this. But they make you take all these other extra classes, and I'm done. So I switched to a Bachelor of Science in Public Relations and Business, where I actually got to spend more time with computers and working with digital programs. Like, yes, this is what I want. And then even then, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. I was still figuring things out. I took like a career management course, and they said, oh, maybe you'd be good at law. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. So I went to law school after, which, that of course changed my direction in life again. I went thinking, oh, I'm going to do something with intellectual property actually. And then I ended up switching more toward and gravitated more toward contracts, criminal defense. So I did a little bit of that, a little bit of entertainment, a little bit of not-for-profit law stuff for a short bit. And then I switched over to education. So instead of like working with kids where, it's on the rough end when I would do juvenile defense, I was doing substitute teaching, and I was a full-time teacher at a 8A high school, which is like where they have like 2,000 plus kids, and then at a K-8 charter school. So, I had quite a few different shifts over time. But then, that was clearly unethical to me too. I was like, yeah, this is really bad. Like, compulsory schooling is really bad. I kind of knew it, but I was like, okay, I got to really see it from behind the scenes to like confirm with myself. Okay, yes, this is as bad as I remember it, as bad as, I know with my ethics, I'm like, okay, there is no way to ethically do this. And so I switched to, while I was doing that stuff, I opened up a tutoring company. I did tutoring stuff. And then I started to roll into doing production more as a full-time thing. Eventually I kind of finally rolled out of the educational part that's, the tutoring stuff altogether, and started to just do Liberty stuff pretty much full-time in production. So yeah, I had a quite different, journeys of different things that were going on leading up to that. But along the way, that I never was, really seriously, like in terms of my academic path, thinking, oh, okay, yeah, I'm gonna like make comic books and music videos and then write nonfiction books. It wasn't really a focus or a thought at that time. So yeah, I mean, but I do have a production background. I do obviously have a passion for that kind of thing, and had thought about that originally. I was in school, and I had always done stuff with photo and video and little film projects here and there just for fun. But then it became more and more possibilities to do that as a regular thing, and so the comic series and then everything else kind of snowballed after.
Nice. Yeah. For me, it's similar. It was like I grew up making little movies just in my backyard with my brother, like just the dumbest movies you've ever seen. But never really dawned on me that could be a career. Like it was always, graduate high school, go to college, get married, have a good career. And it was, it was very structured. It was a very structured life plan. Right. And I definitely bounced around to a bunch of different things, which seems like a lot of creative people do that when they're trying to figure things out. And like as far as my brother, he found liberty because of his stint as a public school teacher. So he saw, like you, he saw firsthand what that can do to a bunch of kids and how that whole system is run. And it was during that time that he's actually the one who helped convert me to libertarianism, was because he saw everything that was happening in the public schools and how mismanaged and everything, all that system is. Especially he taught at it's either the biggest high school, I think it was the biggest high school in Texas, biggest public high school in Texas, which is, thousands and thousands and thousands of kids. And it's such a miserable experience. Nothing about it did he enjoy. He ended up getting accused of things that he never actually did. It became a whole fiasco. So yeah, that kind of turned him off to the funding government schools thing.
Well, it's a prisoner's complex. That's the thing in school. And, I've experienced this as well, is that you're in a prisoner mindset complex because many of these kids don't want to be there and they're frustrated by it. And they're going to look for anything they can to get at their, prison warden. I mean, literally, it's, and I don't blame them. I get it. Like, it's like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Like if you had a prisoner and they hated the warden, they're like doing anything they can to get the warden in trouble or say that like something's wrong. Same thing with the kids in the schooling situation. They literally will look for any way they can to try to say, oh yeah, see the teacher, they did this bad or they lied or they, threatened or whatever.
Right.
So that, that's a serious thing. I never had anything like that, like, seriously manifest on me or anything like that, but I saw it. I saw it with other students and teachers. And I was like, yeah, okay. Well, this makes sense because it's, to them, especially if they don't like you, especially if those students don't like you as a teacher, they're looking for any way they can to get you out or kicked out or in trouble. So absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So for me, my film production company, I have just started basically fully transitioning to basically just making movies about liberty or that have very heavy undertones of freedom and individual rights and stuff like that. How I know a lot of your work, or most of it, or maybe all of it, focuses on liberty and libertarianism and voluntaryism. How's that gone for you as far as an audience goes, as far as like being able to sell books and sell comics and that kind of thing? Like, has that hurt you in any way?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you do things and they're very liberty oriented, it definitely is. It's a general audience disadvantage, obviously, because if it's more specific and niche, you're not going to be able to make as broad of an appeal. Of course, absolutely. Right. If it's more in the face. The flip side of that is that if you have people who like that, of course, then you're also really appealing to them. So I found with the kind of work that I do that I have a pretty strong niche fan base, but I have expanded and kind of, changed direction. Like when I was first doing my comic stuff, I was doing things a little bit more insider baseball with some of the titles and having fun with it. And then I learned and I improved over time. And then eventually I got to this point where I switched how I was doing the comic series to the origin story, where instead of it being more in the face, even though it is like actually like, pretty on the face, when you on the inside, it's not preachy or anything like that. It's like a regular story. So I did find it valuable to move away from just insider baseball on the face, humor, that kind of thing, and to like try to move it more toward a mainstream audience with the content. But I don't sacrifice, the liberty themes. It's just how it's presented, some of the art and some of the framings of the story. But yeah, I mean, I think that it just depends on what your outcome is. If it really is just a matter of what you're looking to do or what the project is. You know what I mean? And for some people, they start with something more niche and then they do okay with that, and then they go broad. It's pretty rare that someone goes broad than niche, but usually because you start to build up success, on the niche first, and then that gives you your testing grounds, and you can go bigger.
Right.
I think like Eric July, he did that very well.
Nice. Yeah.
Because of his commentary, he focused on the mainstream. Like his commentary on comics was normie stuff in terms of like talking about mainstream things. I mean, he was critical of it, but he was talking about mainstream comic topic stuff. So that built up that more mainstream, fan base. So yeah, it just depends on size, scope of project, and what your outcome is, what you want to do with it.
Do you ever, for me, I do struggle because I come from, I started my film career way before I was a libertarian, way before I had all these, all these ideas. And I have some scripts that I've written that definitely wouldn't go over well with the libertarian community, let's say. Have you ever like struggled with maintaining your principles and views in your artwork, as opposed to like, what people call selling out and going into more of a mainstream kind of deal?
I haven't had any personal struggles with it. I don't think it's required. I think you can have compelling stories that are more mainstream without even selling out libertarian principles. It's just like the context of the story, because if it's something, that's like a personal story of someone's life or a struggle, like it doesn't have to be, and this is like how it relates to the government necessarily.
Right.
So it's really just a matter of who are the protagonists, what's the driving emotion that you're seeking to get out of people, like how do they feel by the end of the movie, and that kind of thing. And then, you tailor the dialogue to make sense within that. And I think that, that strong storytelling is what matters no matter what, you're doing. It doesn't matter whether it's libertarian or not. If you don't have a compelling story that makes someone want to, keep watching or turn the page, then it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, they're not going to continue. So
for sure.
You got to put the story writing and craft first. Always, you always got to do that. And I've definitely learned that, on the chopping blocks over the years, just going through and having to edit and make mistakes and revise and get better. But that's the only way you get better, is actually by taking the time to make mistakes and learn from them and keep grinding until you get something that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. What would just from a creative standpoint, not like principles excluded, like what would be something you'd tell somebody who's just getting into a creative field, like what their mindset should be, or like how they should approach what they would like to do in a creative industry?
Yeah, I mean, as a art school dropout, I would say that it's all the best art, and those are the things I thought too when I saw, studying history of art and all that stuff. Some of the best people in the creative world just they don't ask for permission. They just do what it is that they want to do creatively. And you have to be willing to let your audience find you. You know what I mean? It's like, if you're passionate and you're trying just to get better, generally, whatever it is, you just have to create, and your audience will find you as you propagate and get it out there, kind of thing. Because Yeah, otherwise you're not going to be happy with what you're doing if you're just sitting there like, a regular business, like, oh, how do I conform to, marketing to think, oh, well, what will this fit? You know what I mean? If you're really creative, you have to just be yourself and what you enjoy most, and then let your audience find you. And if you suck, well, then that just sucks for you. But that's the reality. I mean, some people need that reality check. Like, hey, if you have this like really weird music style and nobody listens to it, okay, you have to just be willing to accept that. You have 5 fans, okay, well, then you just have to be like, well, I love doing this. Okay, well, if you love doing that, then just accept that that's not what people like. I mean, that's fine. But otherwise, just do what you love and let that be what drives your fan base, essentially, because they will come to you. You know what I mean? You just keep grinding that content, and eventually, typically, unless the government's trying to throttle you, as they've done me many times, they will come to you, and see it and enjoy it. So.
Yeah, that's kind of what we've been discovering. We do this podcast in Georgia, and then one called Liberty Libations, where it's a live show every Thursday night where me and 3 or 4 other guys and girls just sit down and chat over drinks about, sometimes it's news, sometimes it's complete and utter nonsense. But what we've discovered is like consistency is the key to getting more people watching for us. And like, we'll up the production value, when we can, but like putting something out at the same time every single week on YouTube and Rumble has, like, every single podcast we do grows us a little bit more, and you can kind of see it going at a somewhat exponential rate at this point, which is kind of cool. So yeah, I agree. Like grinding it out, consistency, is what happened with my company. Is I got burned out and stopped producing stuff, and now it's really difficult to grow my channel. It's going to take a very long time to get back up there. Yeah. Let's talk about A Vision for a Libertarian Future. I personally have not read it yet. There it is. Can you give people I will say I ordered it as soon as Elizabeth told me that you were going to be on the show, but I'm in the middle of nowhere, Montana. So it takes forever to get here. Like Amazon takes a week to get here. So it'll be a little while. Can you give people a brief description of what it's about?
Sure. So A Vision for a Libertarian Future here is the second of my nonfiction books after Definitive Guide to Libertarian Voluntarism. And it gives people a sense of incremental policy advocacy to kind of get behind. So it's kind of bridging that gap between like, okay, we understand the libertarian principles, but what should we be advocating for? Like, how are we moving toward an actual freer future other than just saying taxation is theft and then the Fed? So it really puts together some specifics on probably the most, I guess you could say, painful government programs, and some of the biggest problems that you'd face in talking about a transition, like how do we get to a truly free market? And it does so in a prescriptive way. So this is definitely like hey, here's what you should do or try to focus on or think about. And it's not like a complete manual in terms of like, here's all the steps and X, Y, Z, what to do. It's more so a big picture thing with some core goals, and then the push and the inspiration for people to take that and think about how to apply that in their own lives in whatever area it is that they have an interest, especially if it's political realm, of course. But there's stuff that's not necessarily political either. So I talk about everything from taxation and the Fed to the federal land holdings to citizenships and migration, to stuff with the military, to talking about education. So really, a lot of the big stuff, and it just helps people kind of encapsulate what it is that they can get unified behind to actually really reduce the size, scope, and power of the state in a way that just doesn't send us all into chaos. Because I think that is often lost. I'm a big radical purist, you could say. I'm definitely, it's not radical to me, but I am anti-state completely. But I wholly sympathize and understand why someone would be like, but how do we get from A to B? How, what about the roads and foreign governments, all this stuff? So those are real valid claims. So I do joke about that, of course, in memes, like who will build the roads? But it is important economic, intrigue and philosophy there that has to be dissected. And I talk about those things and help people kind of wrap their mind around what can get us there without, again, throwing everything into chaos. So.
I love that. I love that. That's something that, so I followed Shane Hazel for governor here in Georgia, and made a documentary about him. And one thing he would always say is, take what you're good at and figure out how to implement that into libertarianism. And what I think creative people like Shane, me, maybe, and even you, sometimes forget is that not everybody is creative, and not everybody knows how that process can go, or even knows how to figure out what to do. So I think like having a big picture and saying, these are the things you can do is something that's pretty important, because people just get lost, and it's very overwhelming to come into this space. So I think that kind of, you said it's not a full-on manual, but it is a kind of a guide of sorts to take steps to make a freer, more libertarian world, and take the government down a notch. And I just think it's hard for people to wrap their brains around how to even get started doing that at certain times in their lives. And so I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool thing to have out there. And I'm excited to read it once I get it.
Well, thank you. Yeah. This book, this is kind of like the bigger policy picture one. The predicate book is more of the principles. And I do have a third book coming out that will be the end to the trilogy of what is kind of what you're describing here. Kind of a primer on the philosophy, a primer on the political action, and a primer on self-knowledge and self-help. The third book is more in the self-knowledge, self-help aspect. It ties into these, but it definitely is helping someone be a more critical thinker and a better applicant of the principles in their own lives. So that last book will probably be out January 2024. It's basically done. Maybe it'll be out sooner. I don't know. We'll see. But that will kind of bring it all together. So with those books, these first two and the third, you can give that to a newer libertarian. They're not thick at all. So these are easy, digestible books. You can sit down on a lazy Sunday and read. And whoever, would read those books, read those three, would immediately be immersed in the ideas of liberty, and really get the foundations in a way that's like very actionable and consistent for them, that, they can feel comfortable and confident about those ideas. Like they wouldn't, they wouldn't feel too shaky about it.
I love that. I love that. And if any of y'all can hear, it's starting to rain and thunderstorm here, so I apologize for any extra noise. During the writing of these books, like for me, I wrote one book once, and I'll probably never do it again because I hated it. It's a miserable experience. What's your experience like when you're writing? Like, do you want to pull your hair out? Like, how does that go for you?
So it's kind of weird because my first book, I pulled together about like half of it from articles I'd already written over the course of like 10 years. And then the other half of the book I wrote in an afternoon. So I kind of had it hodgepodge. I'm like, I really should just put this in the book. And the second book, I wrote that, within a few days, just pounded it out. Because a lot of this stuff for me, and what I'm writing, it comes from years of engagement and debates and articles and video production, like all this other stuff. So I'm drawing, off of 15 plus years of hardcore experience. So it's a little bit easier for me in this realm to write and just, get stuff down, because a lot of it is just, already there. Sometimes, of course, I have to go pull up some citations, because I think my second book has like 163 citations. So, I like to have a bit of credibility with stuff that I write, and, cite to some good stuff as I go. But yeah, I mean, it's not too bad when the book, is not too long, in the 100-page arena. Right. But I could imagine if I were to actually write a book that was like a honker, which would be like, if I took all three of the books that I'm going to write and put them into one, and I had to do that all in one setting, a 300+ page book at once, I could imagine that being a bit tedious and tiring.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's just something to me about like the 20-ish thousand word books, 100 pagers that just feel very doable to me, that feel, convenient to just pump out like that.
Yeah, pump it out, and it makes it more easier for people to want to sit down and read it. You know, it's not
Yeah.
as daunting of a task to sit down and read that compared to Atlas Shrugged, you know.
Right, exactly. And that was a big frustration too, is I didn't see anyone, and I've read a couple books that have tried to do this because I'm familiar with, niche authors in this realm too, but no one had done it in a way that I was really satisfied with completely. So that's why I wrote the books that I did, because I said this doesn't really exist in this form out there. There's more often people who are like, I'm going to just, pull quote from all these different other authors. Here's Mises, here's Rothbard, whoever, Hayek, and they'll like pull quote a bunch. And it's like, yeah, but that's not your own analysis and thought. So my books are rooted in my own independent analysis and thought on libertarian theory, and coming up with some things that are new, some things that are, more normalized, but some things that are very new or differently articulated. But from my reception, and anyone can go check on the reviews, I mean, the reception is overwhelmingly positive, like on my books. And I think that's probably because I did a good job, I think, of encapsulating the core tenets of these principles and the core advocacies, and putting it into a way that just makes it easy and digestible and understandable and quickly defendable too. The way that I frame, the nature of self-ownership and consent, developing that is something that no one can really actually deny, just because consent, is given because you want something to happen. Like, you can't want your consent to be violated, because wanting something, right, is consent. So it's these like logical things, they're mandatory logical things that make it impossible to really refute. You know what I mean? And when you start with those kind of premises about, okay, how do people interact with each other, then you only get people who can lie to your face or try to gaslight you. But anybody else, seeing that, like, yeah, I want you to rape me, like that, then that's not rape. That doesn't, it's just, I mean, there's these fundamental things that you just can't escape. And once you get to that, which is what property rights rooted in scarcity, right? And it's very defendable. It's very easy for people to relate to, because I think personally, from what I've seen, most people do get those principles for themselves. They, they think, yeah, no one should rob me, no one should stab me and steal my stuff while I'm sleeping. Like, they get that. But then they give the special exception to the government, right? Oh, well, they can rob, So.
So more of a personal question. Do you ever get tired of talking about liberty and freedom? Because I listen to two of my best friends argue minarchism versus anarchism every Sunday night for like 3 years, and they just get into a screaming match by the end. And I'm just like, I'm out. Like, I can't do this anymore. Do you ever get tired of like having these discussions and talking about liberty and all this kind of stuff?
Not usually. I usually enjoy talking about it, especially if there's something new. I mean, even when I say the same story a bunch of different times, just the fact that I'm talking to somebody new and like helping them, reflect on their own journey, I think it's great. So I don't get too exhausted by that now.
Gotcha. That's good. That's good, man. Jack, I'm so happy you came on this podcast. I'm so happy that Elizabeth reached out to you, and I'm so happy I know who you are now, because I did not before. I definitely don't do, I don't do a whole lot of research outside of Rothbard, Hayek, and Rand. So I gotta expand my libertarian knowledge base for sure. I'm a new libertarian. I gotta keep learning. So, how do people find you? How do people get your book? That kind of stuff.
Sure. So you can get both books. I mean, they're technically on Amazon, so they print on demand. But my website, which has just come up sufficiently to be usable, is Jack, JACKV as a voluntarist, Lloyd, LOYD, jackvloyd.com. You can also check out my comic book website, V as in victory, VOLCOMIC, volcomic.com. Those are two of my websites that you can pretty much connect to most of my things with between the two of them. But if you look me up online, I'm everywhere. I'm on Twitter, I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Easton C, Minds, Me, We. I can keep going. It's there's too many social medias. But yeah, I got a lot of presence in different places, and I have a lot of different projects in different places. So people find me in different ways. Like if they see me on the unschooling, homeschooling side of things, that's my page, The Honest Teacher. So I do a lot of promotion of that, alternative education, educating outside the state. I do stuff, of course, with the comics. I do stuff with my music, with the philosopher. I do production stuff with her. We've done a bunch of things on gun rights, and we've done a number of skits and educational videos on that too. So there's like a whole bunch of things. I can keep going with different memes and projects and whatever, but those are just a few of the fun ones. So
That's awesome. Seems like you're doing a whole lot, which I very much appreciate. You're one of the, I mean, that seems like what what you were talking about at the beginning, what people try to do at the very beginning of their conversion to libertarianism. They try to do all the stuff, and it seems like you're at a point where you can do all the stuff, which is great.
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a product of first being grounded. I definitely am glad I didn't do that, because you would look pretty dumb if you try to do it all from the beginning, because you're going to probably be contradictory. You're going to probably have some statist inconsistencies. I spent years, kind of debating with people, talking to people. And my early activism was like the low level stuff, like, working with, being part of like college libertarians or students liberty stuff, those kinds of things. And then I worked my way up over time to like doing more and more, I guess you could say, broader forms of activism. So, there's nothing wrong with being spirited and wanting to do something. I find more often than not, people who jump into the activism right away are probably missing out on some much needed personal development first and grounding in the principles. It's pretty rare that someone's going to immediately understand the ethics and the economics strongly enough to be consistent.
Right.
So
I love it.
Yeah.
Jack, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it, man. And yeah, everybody out there, please go to lpgeorgia.com to learn more about Libertarian Party of Georgia and just liberty in general. Also, please go follow us on Rumble, because we've got strikes on YouTube, and at some point they're just going to kick us off and we're not going to be able to be on here anymore. So go check us out on Rumble, Instagram, Facebook, Odyssey, all the above. And yeah, tune in to Liberty Libations every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, and Free Georgia Podcast it comes out every Tuesday. Thank y'all. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Jack.